Stephen Miller was never one to back down from a heated debate. His presence in political circles had always been marked by his sharp rhetoric, a deliberate smirk that lingered even when the conversation took a serious turn, and the constant air of self-assured superiority. He prided himself on being able to dismantle arguments with quick wit and relentless persistence. That day, however, he found himself across from Representative Jasmine Crockett during a nationally televised policy forum. The room buzzed with anticipation even before the cameras rolled, because everyone knew the clash between Miller's unyielding conservatism and Crockett's fierce progressive stance would produce sparks. What no one expected was how the encounter would unfold once the conversation turned personal. The moderator introduced the night's main topic: the future of immigration reform, border security, and the treatment of asylum seekers. Miller leaned forward with a sly grin, ready to dominate. Crockett, dressed in her signature bold colors, carried herself with a calm yet unmistakably commanding energy. As the debate began, Miller interrupted within minutes. "Let's be honest," he said, chuckling as though the entire stage was his playground. "My opponent here is trying to make the case that the United States should simply abandon its borders, that laws don't matter, that we should let chaos reign. I mean, listen to how absurd this sounds." He let out a laugh, sharp and cutting, glancing at the audience as though inviting them to share in his mockery. Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she sat back, her eyes narrowing slightly, letting him speak. Her composure only seemed to bother him more, because he kept going. "You want to prioritize feelings over facts, Congresswoman. You want policies based on emotion rather than the rule of law. That's why the American people can't take your position seriously." Again, he chuckled, this time leaning into the microphone with exaggerated confidence. But then came the silence. Crockett didn't immediately respond, and that silence grew so thick that the audience began to shift in their seats. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice cool, controlled, and sharp enough to slice through Miller's arrogance. "Stephen," she said slowly, pronouncing each syllable as though she were dissecting it, "what you just did right there was a performance. You laughed not because my argument was funny, but because you wanted to diminish it without addressing it. That laugh wasn't strength, it was insecurity, dressed up as confidence." The crowd reacted with a murmur, sensing a shift in energy. Miller tried to interject, but Crockett held up her hand slightly, commanding the space with a simple gesture. "You see," she continued, "I deal with these issues not as a talking point but as a lived reality. I don't have the privilege of dismissing human pain with a chuckle. When families are torn apart, when children cry themselves to sleep because their parents were deported without warning, that isn't theoretical to me. That's real. And every laugh you throw out is a reminder that you don't understand that reality, or worse, that you don't care." Miller straightened in his seat, his smirk faltering just slightly. "And let me be clear," Crockett pressed on, her tone colder now, each word landing like a hammer, "you don't get to trivialize suffering. You don't get to reduce lives to punchlines. Because while you sit here and laugh, people are crying. While you polish your soundbites for a camera, communities are grieving. And I assure you, those people are listening right now. And they'll remember who laughed and who fought for them." The room went utterly silent. Miller, for once, didn't have a ready retort. His eyes darted toward the moderator, perhaps hoping for an interruption, but the moderator stayed quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. Finally, Miller attempted to regain ground. "Congresswoman, that's a lot of emotional theater, but policies cannot be dictated by sentimentality." Crockett cut him off, her voice steady as steel. "This isn't sentimentality. It's accountability. And if your version of policy requires you to strip people of their humanity, then it's not policy, it's cruelty. And cruelty doesn't make a nation stronger. It makes it rot from the inside." Her words hit like a thunderclap. Even those who disagreed with her politically couldn't deny the force of her delivery. Miller opened his mouth, closed it again, and then forced a strained smile. But it was too late. The chuckle that had once seemed like confidence now echoed back as arrogance, exposed and hollow. The debate continued, but Miller never quite recovered. He tried to pivot back to statistics, to grandiose claims about national security, but each time he spoke, the audience seemed to hear the ghost of Crockett's words lingering in the air: "You laughed because you were insecure." As the cameras kept rolling, Crockett's dominance only grew. She dismantled his talking points with precision, but she did it without raising her voice, without theatrics. She didn't need to shout, her calm authority was enough. Every time Miller tried to regain control, she gave him nothing to push against. It was like he had stepped into a boxing ring only to discover his opponent had already anticipated his every move. By the end of the program, when the moderator asked each participant for a closing statement, Miller muttered something about law and order, but the conviction was gone. Crockett, on the other hand, closed with a message that resonated beyond the studio. America is at its best not when we laugh at the vulnerable, but when we lift them up. We don't weaken ourselves by caring, we strengthen ourselves by refusing to let cruelty define us. That's what I stand for. And no amount of chuckling will make me apologize for it. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Miller's faint smirk looked almost painful as he tried to hold it in place. After the cameras shut off, an aide whispered something into his ear, but Miller brushed them away. He looked shaken, perhaps even angry at himself for letting Crockett seize the moment. She, meanwhile, simply gathered her notes, exchanged a polite nod with the moderator, and walked off stage without so much as a glance in his direction. But the audience, and soon the entire nation, had seen what happened. Clips of Miller's laugh and Crockett's cold, cutting response flooded social media within hours. Hashtags trended, hashtag Crockett shuts him down and hashtag laughing at pain. Commentators replayed the exchange again and again, dissecting how a single chuckle had backfired so spectacularly. For Miller, it became one of those moments he couldn't escape. His laugh, once a symbol of his swagger, had turned into a symbol of arrogance exposed. For Crockett, it was a defining moment of strength, the night she reminded the country that composure, clarity, and conviction could silence even the loudest derision. And though Miller would appear on many stages afterward, he never laughed quite the same way again when faced with someone like Jasmine Crockett. Word count: approximately 1,752.